The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the good, better, best of proposal writing. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. We are so happy to have you here. And also, thank you for the questions you submitted at registration. Those questions help us shape these sessions into something more applicable to you and your business needs. Should you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the questions tab on your control panel. We will get to as many as we can. This session is also being recorded, and the presentation will be available on our website by tomorrow should you wish to review or share the material. As always, I am Mallory Price and will be working behind the scenes of this webinar. Joining me is Paige Frame, president of McKinnon Mulherin, a communications training and consulting firm. Paige is a very knowledgeable and skilled in proposal writing, and we look forward to her insight. So thank you, Paige, for joining us. And Nancy Eves is program director at Shipley, also joining us. She is an APMP practitioner, certified and experienced writer and proposal manager. And Brad Douglas is executive vice president of global strategy at Shipley. He is also the co-author of Shipley's proposal writer and proposal manager playbooks. So thank you, panelists, for being here. We are so excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Thank you, Mallory.
Certainly. So, and Brad, I'm not seeing the agenda, so I don't know if your screen is still paused. There it is. So here's what we're going to cover today. So first of all, we'll talk about some of your questions that you submitted at registration. Then we'll get into recognizing bad writing. Then into good writing, then into better writing, and the best writing, and characteristics, customer focus, readability, and stickiness, and why those things help to create the best writing. Then we'll summarize and get to any leftover questions that we have, time permitting. So we'll go over just a few of these questions that were submitted and kind of give you an overarching view of what we might talk about today. Here's the first one. What are the best practices for writing customer-focused proposals, and how do we trim the fluff?
It's a good one.
It is a good one. Any research on length and formatting requirements to make content easy to read and digest? Another good one for sure. And can you share some tips and strategies for developing the outline for the proposal? Outlining, I know, a word that strikes fear into many of us, but it's very important. So that's a very good question.
Okay, Paige, I hope you'll get ready to address that and when we get to that area. Great question.
And finally, I like this question too. How do we convince loquacious bosses of the importance of plain language? So excellent question. I'm excited to hear what our panelists have to say. So Brad, I will pass the mic to you.
So Mallory, I need a definition of loquacious. I mean, how is that plain writing?
So loquacious means wordy, verbose, saying too many words. So the importance of plain language for our loquacious bosses and the like.
All right. Thank you. Again, we got a ton of questions from you all as you registered, and thank you for that, because it does tell us what you would like to hear and hopefully learn or at least discuss. We thought we ought to probably talk about the opposite of good writing for a few minutes and talk about some of the bad habits or what makes some of our proposal writing really not as good as it should be. And in the last, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 months, I can say with certainty the sales proposal has taken on a little more importance in competing for work and winning business because of our inability to do more face-to-face and the briefings and the grip and grin and the bidder conferences and industry days and some trade shows. Sure, they've been done virtually, But I think buyers, customers have defaulted more and more over the last several months due to this pandemic to depending on the proposal to help them in their decision-making process. So let's talk about maybe the not so good side of writing, things we need to learn to avoid, and I'm going to ask Paige if she'd cover that. And then we'll go through the good, better, best of proposal writing. So Paige, would you take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Brad. And I think this is a really good point is, looking at what bad writing is really helpful as we're trying to improve our writing. What things should we be trying to avoid? And unfortunately, we see a lot of bad writing. And ironically, it often comes from very smart people and could be either knowingly or not that we're trying to impress people in our writing, that we're doing things that we think will make us look smarter and better at whatever we're proposing, but it does the opposite. So things that we might end up doing is being wordy, maybe being overly technical, filling our content with extra jargon and complicating things. So as we're trying to impress people, what we're actually doing is turning them away, making things more confusing for them to understand, which is not helpful. So I guess the next question to that is, who cares? What's the impact of bad writing? That wordiness and jargon-filled content that we were talking about can confuse your reader, that they just don't even know what you're proposing. They have this confused look on their face, just like our picture on the screen of wondering what you're trying to propose to them. In the same way, our overly complex sentences and sections might end up circling around the requirement, but not actually addressing what the requester needs, and ends in non-compliance, which is a major bad impact on your proposal writing. And even if it is compliant, it could be hard for them to score or evaluate it if they're confused about what you're trying to say, what you're proposing. And then finally, instead of impressing your reader, you may end up losing credibility with them, that you've confused them into a circle, that they're no longer thinking that you're credible and able to do what you're proposing.
Paige, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I know your company, you do a lot around communications, some about even image and brand, and making sure all communication channels are consistent and aligned. Are you suggesting here that a poorly written proposal can actually impact your brand and your reputation with this loss of credibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you were saying, Brad, it's been trending this way anyway, but especially in the last several months, last year, we're doing so much more of our communication in writing. And so each piece of content that you're putting out there and writing down reflects your organization and your brand and your company. And so having one poorly written proposal may not seem like a huge deal, and you're just trying to get it out in the deadline, but it could reflect really poorly on you. It could affect your whole brand across across all your communications, just like you were saying.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that another impact of bad writing is that it costs you money. We see this quote here that bad writing is costing American businesses close to $400 billion every year. And that's obviously a big chunk of that is coming from lost business, as we're talking about things that are your bad writing being non-compliant and maybe losing these opportunities. But a lot of it is just coming from inefficiencies. So when you're sending an email that makes no sense and someone has to read it 5, 6 times to understand what you're saying, that time adds up. And it's a lot of time people invest in trying to translate, understand what other people are writing and saying, making it easier to understand and absorb saves all of us time and money, which is very important. So recognizing bad writing, where do we see this? What does it look like? A lot of it comes down to poor planning, not coming up with a plan up front. So poorly organized, where you can't see how one idea flows into the next. No roadmaps, so orienting your reader, tell them what you're going to tell them, so that starting out with, here's what we're going to cover in this section, so that your reader can be prepared for what's coming up, for more details, and be able to organize that in their own head. And boring. Bad proposal writing is boring. So we want to remember that our proposals are supposed to be persuasive documents. You're trying to convince your reader to buy your solution. So if your reader or evaluator is boring or confused, it's really not a good sign for you in terms of persuading them to pick your solution. And then painful to even look at. I think we've all been here where you look at a page and it is wall-to-wall text with very little space on sides or in between paragraphs. And nothing is motivating you to read that wall of text. That is bad writing. And same thing with cluttered, either too much text or just bad organization. You can't really see one section from the next. It's not motivating to read through it. And then we'll get into this a little bit more, but bad writing is self-centered. So you're being asked to tell about your company, your organization, or your what solution you are proposing. But at the same time, it shouldn't be all about you. It needs to be about the customer. We're going to talk about making more customer-focused writing. So Punchline, you don't want your reader to be this woman on the screen who's very frustrated as she's reading through your proposal and confused about what you're trying to propose.
Awesome, thank you, Paige. Just for a second, wanted to engage those that have joined us on a little bit of a poll. As we go forward and we start to talk about, we're going to show a few more pitfalls, things we should avoid before launching into really what is the best approach to proposal writing. So let me open up a poll, and you can go right to your keyboard and respond to this, and let's kind of get a feel for what kind of challenges the group here on this webinar today are facing. So if you'd go ahead and answer this poll, and I'll show you the results in just about 30 seconds or so. Okay, we've had about almost 80% have answered already. So here you see the results. Interesting, very interesting. The biggest one, the most common response here of the choices given. I know there's other reasons. I know there's a lot of other challenges, but converting technical information to easy to read and evaluate information, that seems to be a big challenge for a lot of us. Being too wordy, too technical, even getting started. I actually thought not having enough time would be a little bigger of an issue than it is, but that's interesting. So thank you for that. It just gives us a feel for some of what this group's thinking and feeling and challenged with. So I just wanted to pull up real quick, and the page walked through very clearly some risks, some high costs, some confusion that is created by bad writing. And our customers, whoever we're writing to, our customers, they expect better. They expect something good from us. If we've done a lot of really good upfront work in selling or in capture work and positioned ourselves, they expect something that reflects that hard work and that good work. Let me just show you actual instructions from a customer to bidders, people, the companies who are going to submit a bid, and see what you think here. Let's see, Mallory, are you seeing that?
I am, oh, there it is. It's sliding onto the screen.
Okay. So I want everyone just to take a few minutes. This is actual content from a request for proposal from a customer. Here's what they're saying they want in the proposal. I've highlighted a few things just to draw your attention there. Pretty clear, isn't it? It's pretty clear what they expect. They don't want ambiguous. They want it to be, they want our proposal to be convincing and compelling and to demonstrate capability. Now let me pull this down and go a little further here. Here's some more of what they want. If we submit a proposal without explaining how we're going to meet their needs, their objectives, their requirements, they don't want that. They don't want a bunch of features or technical jargon. They need to know how we're going to solve their problem. In our proposals, statements that use past performance as a basis for technical rationale are also generally inadequate. Unsupported statements. So I pull this open only to share with you, this is reality. This happens to be, a government customer, but it could be a state government, federal, local. It could be a business that puts those same requirements on us as proposal writers. So that's what customers want. That's what they expect. Clear and compelling. Okay, are we back on the rocky path here?
We are. And Brad, I also had a question come in about bad writing. So there's a little bit of background here, but it says the bosses said they were experts when it came to communicating with customers, and they knew that a certain flavor of bad writing was exactly what customers like to see. Do you have any research, or is there any research out there that backs up the value of good writing?
I missed, I thought I heard you say the customer wanted bad writing. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so it says the boss said they knew they were the experts when it came to communicating with customers, and they knew that a certain flavor of bad writing was exactly what the customers like to see.
Okay. I would say customer awareness and intimacy and knowledge of the customer trumps best practices. So if they want us to write in slang, or they want us to write in a really familiar tone, or they want us to really get in the weeds technically, then that's what we do. And that's what we might call in this webinar bad writing. But our position on that is, to the extent that you know the customer and you know for sure, you're not guessing, but for sure what they want, you give it to them how they want it. Even if it violates several of those things, that Paige just walked through. That would be my response. Great question. Intriguing question, really. Okay, we're going to go through here, and we'll run through this pretty quickly because this goes back to you know, some of the things we learned about grammar and the very basics of English writing. And so we're going to ask Nancy if she'd go through some ways that we can really take a very basic message, something very basic, clear, and concise, and kind of mess it up, and see if you find yourself doing any of these things. So, Nancy, would you go ahead? Weak verbs. What would be an example of a weak verb?
So Jack and Jill went up the hill to get a pail of water. Not a very good action verb.
Okay. Unfamiliar words.
Jack and Jill climbed up the hill to fetch an ewer of water.
Ewer. All right. Putting introductory phrases at the beginning to push the subject of the sentence back.
To fetch a pail of water, Jack and Jill climbed up the hill.
Okay. Putting the action at the end of a sentence. How many of us do this?
Jack and Jill, to fetch a pail of water, climbed up the hill.
Okay. Putting modifiers. Guilty, I'm raising my hand. This is something I constantly need to remind myself of. Putting modifiers as far away as possible from the words they modify.
Jack and Jill climbed to fetch a pail of water up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Starts to really muddy the messaging.
Oh, it just gets clanky to read. Passive voice too often.
The hill was climbed by Jack and Jill so that a pail of water could be fetched.
Okay. Yikes. Putting the doer at the end of the sentence.
To fetch a pail of water, the hill was climbed by Jack and Jill.
Okay. Yeah. False, the good old false subjects. I know, Mallory, this is one of your favorites.
It was Jack and Jill who climbed up the hill to fetch a pail of water. I'd say that's a good way to trim the fat off of your writing too. If you see any false subjects, it's a good way to eliminate that out of your writing.
So the false subject is it was, right?
It was, yeah, it is the false subject.
Another false subject would be things like there is, right? There would be a false subject.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Piling on the
Jill,
gobbledygook.
Sorry, I jumped again. Jack and Jill ascended the acclivity to retrieve a vessel of Adam's ale.
Yikes. All right. Turning verbs into nouns.
Jack and Jill did the hill climb for purpose of water retrieval.
Unnecessary technical jargon. This has to do with that little poll we just did and survey. Some of us have challenges getting technical information into something the evaluator can actually understand.
Jack and Jill traversed the gradient to fetch an alembic vessel of H2O.
Okay. Wordy phrases, more fluff.
Jack and the company of Jill climbed their way up the hill for the purpose of fetching water in the approximate amount of a pail full.
Okay. Using multiple redundant words. Multiple redundant. Good.
Both Jack and Jill climbed all the way up to the top of the hill summit to fetch a pail filled to its capacity with water.
Yikes. Indiscriminately adding cliches to our writing.
Jack and Jill, who need no introduction, climbed up the hill by leaps and bounds to fetch to their good offices a pail of water by hook or by crook.
Man, okay. We've got to make it easy for the evaluator, right? The reader. Stringing nouns together to form a subject.
Jack and Jill, water retrieval, hill ascent was achieved.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for fighting through that. But those, boy, I encourage you to go back and look through this and then take a look at some of your own writing and see if you're inadvertently making it harder to read or understand, or I like to call these little speed bumps. If I'm evaluating a proposal, I'd like it to go smooth. You know, I like to evaluate and just go through without a bunch of speed bumps like many of these are to distract me or annoy me, frankly. So let's talk now. Let's shift. Let's do a shift and let's talk about good writing, good, better, best. Obviously, good writing, it's going to help us win more business. We're going to be evaluated at a higher level based on the quality and caliber of our writing. It establishes credibility. Evaluators are human. They want trust. They want to trust what they're reading, what they're looking at. Improve our personal and company brand. Paige talked about that. Reduces confusion, rework, and waste. So all of those bad things Paige talked about are showing up. We got to do the opposite. Right? We've got to move the customer toward a buying decision. Now, this is important for us if you're newer to proposal writing. It's not something you've done a lot of. Sometimes we have to have a little bit of a mind shift. We have to remember that the evaluator who we're writing to, they have a different motivation in reviewing and reading a proposal than they do other documents. It's not just awareness or informational. Their motivation is they've been assigned to help make a decision, to spend the organization's money. And so we've got to, as we write, we've got to think that way. We've got to think about moving the customer toward that buying decision, being persuasive, compelling. It's a chance for us, if we write well, to demonstrate our competency. If we move a little notch up into the better writing, it should be compelling and help the customer choose us. We should integrate our value proposition in our writing. So hopefully, as we've gone through qualifying a sales opportunity, we know the customer, we know what's important to them, we can weave in our value proposition, how they're really going to get a return on their investment. Better writing answers the why us question. Why should they buy from us? It showcases our competitive advantage. Many of us are competing against the same companies over and over and over again. So we need to showcase our strengths and our competitive advantage in the way we write, in what we write. Again, demonstrates competent. It has to be, Paige mentioned, you know, people glance. They take a look on the screen or on the document, and that first impression is important. Don't think it's not. It should be visually appealing for the evaluator to look at and to read. And we've got to be consistent in not only the words and the messaging, but also the tone. And a lot of those speed bumps that Nancy read through, you know, they can create all kinds of inconsistencies. If one section of our proposal is written in completely passive voice, and then the next section is very much more in active voice, an evaluator will be a little confused by that. And so consistency is really, really important. So let's go the best writing. Up here on this title, it's customer focused. It's laser focused on the customer. It's easy for them to evaluate. So it addresses all the requirements. It addresses all of the evaluation factors that the customer has given us. Customer focus at all levels. Easy to read and evaluate, leverages win themes and discriminators. Nancy and I were in a 4-hour training session yesterday, and it was on this very topic of how important it is that we learn to write really good theme statements that provide discriminators for our solution. A discriminator is something that's important to the customer, and hopefully it's unique to us. Is there something unique to us that we can write about in our proposal that we know is of value to the customer? That is what we mean by a discriminator. And then in our writing, we emphasize this a lot, and we'll say it again, we have to validate our claims. So if we're writing about a particular capability we have and how much faster it will make someone's job and responsibilities, we've got to validate that claim. And then, of course, we're ultimately trying to win more business. So those are just some of the ways that good, better, and best writing shows up and appears. And we want to dive now, and some of you who have joined previous webinars have heard some of this before, but we want to quickly, and then you can go back and review this, in the recording or the printed material. But we want to walk through, what do we mean when we say customer-focused writing and messaging? So Paige, if you don't mind walking through the elements, if you will, the indicators of what we mean by customer focus.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to reiterate what Brad just said. I think this is such a useful slide and printout to help us remember, because there is a lot to make things customer focused. And as we go through all these, it's not reasonable to expect that you could do every single one of these in every sentence of your proposal, but keeping these things in mind will help you move your writing to be more customer focused, especially if you're kind of new to that style of writing. So very first thing in making it customer focused is putting the customer first. It is naming them before us in the proposal, in the sentence, all the way down to that sentence level of naming them before us, and then naming them more often than us. Make sure that it is consistently pointing back to the customer, what's in it for them, why does it matter to them. And did we mention and address what their buying objective is? Have we made it clear that we know what's important to them, and then have we tied it back to our solution? Do we make it clear that we understand what they need and that our solution is the best proposal for that need? Did we address their hot button issues, the things that are most important to them, and prioritize order? So really putting the most important issues to the customer first and giving them the most space in our proposal. Are we listing benefits before features? So all of our solutions and products have very specific features, and this is one of the biggest ways you can move from being very technical to being more persuasive and compelling. That a feature is saying what your solution, your product does. The benefit says, so what? It's why does it matter to the customer and the requester. So really making sure that we need to say what the features are and back up our solutions, but are we really leaning in on benefits, leading with those benefits, why it matters to the customer first?
Paige,
Mm-hmm.
Paige, we have a question I noticed here. The question is, what do we mean? Okay, now it's jumping around. What do you mean by linking the buying objective to our offer? I don't know if you want to take a shot at that, or if you want me to address that number 4 there.
Yeah, I'll start and you can jump in. Is really understanding understanding the customer's hot buttons, why they're even sending out this RFP. What is their underlying or stated need? Are we really connecting that to our offer so that we're really addressing what the problem is, not just answering the questions, giving that full story. How would you want to add to that, Brad?
Yeah, no, you're right on. It's sometimes what we'll do in a proposal is we'll restate the customer's buying objective that we know XYZ company that your objective for this project is to streamline and manage your inventory control systems better. Okay, that's the buying objective. And then we sometimes forget to link our solution, whatever it is we're providing as a solution. Is it, well, we've got this new cloud-based system, or we've got this system that backs up data faster and better than others. We forget to tell the customer why that links back to their original objective. So if in everyday life, if we're going in to buy a new car, and our objective is we want a car that has better traction in the winter for snow and ice, if that's our primary objective in buying a new car, well, if the salesperson goes off and all he talks or she talks about is the navigation system on the dashboard and the leather seats and the heated seats and all that, he's not linking that car back to our original objective, which was we need something with really good traction for safety. See what I'm saying? So it's just, we tend to get so enamored with our solution in our proposal writing that we forget to link it back to what really matters to the customer. So sorry, I didn't mean to take that long, but that was a really good question. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Those examples are super helpful. That's exactly right. We want to make sure that we're validating all of our claims. If we're saying that we're the best, or if we have a statistic, make sure that we're validating that. We want to make sure we're organizing our response as instructed. So this really is part of being customer focused, because we are acknowledging that the customer asked us to format it and organize it in a certain way. We want to do that for them, make sure it matches what they requested. Did we make our value proposition apparent to the customer? So in a similar vein as to what Brad was just talking about with linking the buyer objective to the offer, we want to make sure that our value proposition, what makes us stand out from the competition, that it's very clear and obvious to the customer what we are proposing. And then finally, part of why we're all here is, were we consistent, clear, and concise? Are we implementing good proposal writing that's easy to understand, easy to evaluate, and easy to remember, that we stand out as a clear solution to the customer? So these are great questions to ask ourselves. Pin it up by your desk and consistently reevaluate your own writing and proposal if we're doing all these things in each section and throughout the proposal.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Paige. Very good reminders and guidelines for us. Mallory, I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions that have, I see a lot of questions coming in. Is there anything you wanted to pose to the panel at this point?
Yes, actually. And Paige, I think I'll ask this question to you. So we had a question come in early on that, basically states, proposal writing is not always easy, but a lot of people think it is. Not everyone is as skilled at writing as maybe they think they are, or, something along those lines. So how do we get the powers that be to recognize that proposal writing is an actual skill and a profession, and not just the act of picking up a pencil?
Oh, that is a big question.
It is.
I think, and it is a great one. I think that there is this, exactly as the person asking said, is we all do a lot of different writing in our day-to-day, and especially if you haven't seen a lot of great writing, or haven't gone through great courses or even degrees on what makes good writing. Sometimes it's hard to recognize that in ourselves, that you might not have those skills or experience built up. And one of the best ways you can do that is to show some examples of great writing. So even things like, it's a good time to pause on it with this slide, is even when you're having people review your work, you could even hand them these questions and say, I'm working to make sure that our writing is customer focused. Would you mind reviewing it and see if I'm doing all of these things? And it helps them kind of switch their mindset to see what kind of things would make for the best type of writing. We've got a few other checklists in here, and I know Shipley's got a lot that they share often, but kind of helping small scale rather than making a one-time pitch of why professional proposal writing is important, but small steps of here is what good writing looks like. Will you check my own work as you're reviewing it? Will you see if I'm doing this? And that can help kind of slightly shift that mindset as you're trying to make that pitch.
Yeah, good question. And then I'm going to put in a plug here, for APMP. Some of you will be familiar, the Association of Proposal Management Professionals. It's a professional nonprofit association. It focuses directly on proposal management, proposal writing, proposal graph, all the elements of proposal development. And the fact that that association now is totally legitimate, it's growing, it's global, it's got 3 levels of professional certification. It is a profession, and it is not easy. So convincing leadership that it isn't easy, that's a hard task until you, I'll be bold, throw them into the lion's den and make them do a section, and let's see how easy it is for them to be compliant, compelling, and concise and correct. But that's kind of flippant. So great question though. Okay, we're going to click through these fast too, because we encourage you to go back and actually review these. And this isn't just Shipley's thinking. This is based on thousands of engagements, interventions we've had with clients, domestically, globally, and it's based on readability studies and data. So these aren't just some random thoughts we came up with, but these are some really good guidelines if we want to be better at proposal writing. Use short, coherent, logical paragraphs. If a paragraph gets longer than 8 lines, it's getting a little chunky. Readability studies show that shorter paragraphs are easier to read and easier to comprehend. Use lists wisely. Don't have a list of 10, 12, 14 items. You be consistent in how we use lists. Those are powerful writing devices. Active voice when we can. I'm not suggesting at all that a whole proposal be an active voice. But when we have a choice and we can write in a more active tone, it is more compelling to the reader. It's more real. There's more accountability built into active voice than passive voice. Keep sentences less than 20 words. Go back to your own documents after this webinar. Look at some of your own writing. How often do you go with run-on sentences? 30, 35 words. Keep them less than 20. Use headings and let headings be like road markers along the highway that guide the reader. You can almost be guaranteed that an evaluator, a customer, is going to read the headings. And if we're wasting that precious space on just one-word headings all the time, we're missing an opportunity to reinforce our sales message. So learn to write informative headings that actually support your sales message. Nancy, would you mind going through these last 4 here for us, please?
Of course. Use graphics to support your sales message. We'll talk about graphics a little bit more later in the webinar, but graphics that are done really well are one of the most effective elements of the proposal. Brad and Paige also touched on this, that substantiate all claims. You can't just make a blanket statement that you're the best at something without backing it up with some sort of statistics or evidence that it supports it. Preview all graphics in the text before the graphic appears. If the graphic appears without being introduced, readers who aren't just skimming the proposal may become really confused by what the graphic is supposed to mean or present to them. And then, of course, be consistent. This is the best way overall to make your proposal easy to read and evaluate. Consistency in your structure, layout, your messaging, and your tone helps you keep everything really clear and concise, and it'll help you trim down that fat and that fluff in your proposal writing.
Good. So just kind of what Paige said, you know, print this off and keep it handy, but even more important, coach your team. We have to turn oftentimes to technical specialists, solution architects, engineers to write and to create content for proposals. Well, these are really good guidelines to coach and mentor others with as well. So Paige, one of the things I've always been impressed with your company, and when we partner on projects and things, is how good you all are at planning, you know, in advance and not just putting fingers to keyboard. Could you walk us through some of these planning guidelines that you found it to be effective?
Yeah, I would love to. It's very important to us to do upfront planning, and I loved seeing some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time of people asking about the best way to outline and to have that consistency. What can we do? Because this is a great answer, is making sure that we are planning ahead, that this actually saves us quite a bit of time. I know we get an RFP and we see that deadline and we're like, just jump in. But if you can pause and plan and figure out what your solution is, what you're going to talk about, and outline it like this, it's going to save you time and rework in the end every single time. So the first thing that you want to do is set up some system that you figure out how you're going to gather input from your different sources. So if this is your compliance matrix and you're assigning pieces or setting up interviews with SMEs, whatever it might be, make sure you've got a plan for that. Then develop an outline. I really suggest and like to put that outline right into the template that you're planning to use. So even though we're not jumping in and writing any content yet, we want to eventually, and if we can start in the template and create our outline there, that's going to make it easier down the line. We also want to make sure that we're getting our win themes figured out and consistent at this stage when we're outlining. When we're putting our, you'll see in the outline, it's matching what the RFP would say. We've got our headings in place. Then we can actually tie which win themes we want to, or what pieces of the win theme we want to hit on in each section. So we're not writing yet, but maybe we're putting in a few notes of touch on this, include this win theme, whatever it might be. And other tip that's just so important to me, I think it's so helpful in making sure that your work is consistent from the get-go, is establishing a style sheet. So coming up with a sheet that where you can document the decisions that you're making as you're going along. So it's a living document. It might change as you're working on your proposal, but you are you're documenting things like, what's the requesting organization's preferred acronym or abbreviated name? You want to use that consistently throughout the proposal. Or are you going to call your buyers customers or clients? Or what is the right spelling or capitalization of your system or the requester system? Things like that that you can put in the style sheet so all your writers are writing in a similar way, using the same terms, can make you be more consistent up front. But it has a dual purpose of, by the time you get to the end and you have someone coming in to edit or proofread, you already have a style sheet in place to give to them and say, these are the styles we're following. And then that editor proofreader isn't coming up with making those decisions at the last minute and trying to make it consistent there at the end. That can really help everyone stay on the same page from the get-go. And then in your outline, identifying graphics that you're going to want to include, either just noting ones that already exist that you'll want to plug in, or ones that you need to create. Figuring that out here at the outline level will be really helpful, especially if you need that time, that lead time to create something new.
Great, thank you, Paige. And this image on the right just shows a very a basic start of a potential outline, just in plain simple Word. But you notice what this person's done, along with the headings. They've noted where we're going to address the RFP, where the requirements are found. They've also noted that the customer on this particular proposal is going to give this section 25% of the evaluation weighting. So that's kind of interesting to include in an outline. And then they've assigned this section, experience and service methodology, 11 pages. So they know what the page limits are, and they're now starting right in their outline to allocate a page count for each section. So this really becomes a helpful tool, as Paige says, the outline, an annotated outline with as much detail as you can provide to contributors, so that they can give us their best information. Okay, let's talk now about readability. And this proposal writing, this is what proposal writing is all about. It's all about making our offer, our solution, documenting it and improving readability so that it can be scored. So Paige, would you walk us through some of these elements of readability that are so important?
Yeah, definitely. So readability is exactly what it sounds like. Is it making it easier on your reader to get the information, absorb it, understand it? So there are some very official ways to measure readability. You might have heard of like the Flesch reading score, or SMOG, or SAM scoring. It'll look at your writing, pop out, use a formula, pop out a score of what your grade level is or readability level, which is helpful. But also there are just some things that you can do in general to make things more readable, easier for on your reader, on your evaluator, whoever's reading your work. So we already mentioned lists. Let's break up content, make it easier to absorb that information. We mentioned using graphics, not just for decoration, but to support your message. Headings can really help guide the reader through your content. So people naturally scan, see what's on the page, and then dive in more. And then using simple, concise words. So again, not making them grab their dictionary, try to figure out what you're talking about, but using words that they instantly understand, instantly know what you're proposing and talking about. And then we talked about active voice, passive voice. Make sure you've got the doer in your sentence so they know who's taking the action. And then avoiding that technical jargon and wordiness, making it simple, easy to understand, grouping similar ideas together. So you're trying to take the work out of it for your reader. You don't want them to have to interpret anything, figure something out, solve any puzzles of what you're trying to say to them. It should be very clear what you're proposing and make sense on a first reading.
Good. Okay, now for all of you joining the webinar, we're going to give you 10 seconds to try to memorize what comes up on your screen. Do not write it down, that's cheating. Don't type it in, don't do anything, don't take a screenshot, picture, or anything. Just memorize these letters when they appear on your screen. I'll give you 10 seconds. Now, please type those letters as you saw them in the questions tab on your control panel. Just type those letters that you just saw in order. We got a ha ha ha, Mallory.
We got a few of them.
Wow, okay.
We got some people with really good memories in here too.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's take a look at those same letters. Very good. Anyone get it exactly right?
I don't think so. We got some people who were close.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. There's those letters. What in the world does this have to do with proposal writing? It's what Paige just covered. Our job is to make it easy to evaluate. Grouping similar ideas instead of putting ideas randomly throughout a page or section confuses the reader. If we make it easy for them by grouping similar ideas, keeping it concise and clear, easy to navigate and understand, we will be remembered, we will score higher. Evaluators sometimes have to go back and justify a high score that they give a proposal. Well, let's make it easy for them to do that by the way we write and communicate. Part of that is the way we group information. We keep relevant information together. So group ideas is part of improving readability. Lists, we won't dwell on this, you can come back and read this later, but this is a real ugly list here for all these reasons. It tells us why it's an ugly list. It's not parallel, it's all confusing and jumbled. So best practices for lists are here, name the list, give it a name, make the items parallel. If the first one starts with a verb, they should all start with a verb. Use bullet points unless numbering is important for some reason. Limit the number of items. Use white space to our advantage. We're trying to make it easy. I know word count or not, page count is a problem sometimes on big complex government proposals. We don't think we can fit everything in, so we cram it in. Be careful with that. Let white space and emphasis techniques like lists work to our advantage. We talked about graphics and captions. Just make sure they clearly communicate our selling point. Use action captions with graphics. A graphic without a caption is not complete. It's not informative. It's not customer friendly. So use captions. Headings. Here's some real good examples of what we mean. It's easy to do telegraphic headings at a high level of a proposal. It's really of value to the reader, though, to make your second level headings much more informative. See how these second level headings support the sales message? We're helping reduce overhead costs because of our flat organizational structure. Well, our benefit, the value to the customer is right there in the heading. Use headings, leverage headings in our writing. Get good at writing informative headings at this level. The best writing reduces wordiness. Instead of have the ability to, how about we just say can? Or instead of conduct an investigation, let's just investigate it. You get the idea. Check our writing. Let's go back. Check our writing. Can we make it more concise and get rid of that wordiness? Unnecessary technical wording. Would you now type in your question section of your control panel what Mallory means by this statement? What does she mean by this statement you see on your screen? No idea. You got them fooled, Mallory.
I do my
But
best.
a few are onto you.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, so all she's trying to tell us is that she used a fork to eat a potato. Look at all that butter. So don't use unnecessary technical wording in our proposal writing. And then active passive voice. Passive voice is fine in a lot of cases, but sometimes it can be perceived as being vague and it can put the emphasis in the wrong place. Here's a passive statement. The ball was missed by the batter. That's passive. An active example of that would be the batter missed the ball. So it's not the ball's fault. The emphasis should be on the batter that swung and missed and not the ball. So check yourselves. And again, we're not saying one or the other all the time, but sometimes active voice can be a little bit more authoritarian, a little more action oriented. The best writing is a team effort. Those of us who maybe have been doing this for a little while, we know this. We depend on others. There is nothing better to improve our writing than peer review, than asking someone to take a look at what we've done and give us an honest critique. So it's a team effort. We're writing for the evaluators. Do what Paige suggests. Plan and organize the document, the section, the executive summary, the white paper before we write. Collaborate with our technical experts. Engage others, peers and others to help us review. Go through, leave time for a revision process so that we are clear, concise, and accurate, like Nancy said early on. Double check everything and always focus on readability. And then we'll leave you with this. We won't go through each one of these items, but I would encourage all of you in your organizations or in your own writing to come up with just some checklists, simple little checklists that you can go back and check yourself on. You know, what's working, what isn't working, and it gives us a way to just double check so we're not forgetting anything. And then the final thing we wanted to do today is we want to leave you with a challenge. Paige went through 10 indicators of customer-focused writing. Nancy and I went through some basic guidelines about sentence length, a paragraph, things like that. Here's our challenge for you. Our challenge would be to go soon, identify some of your recent writing, proposal writing if you can, evaluate it against the guidelines and the customer-focused standards that we've talked about in this webinar, and ask yourself and see, are there some things I could do differently to improve? So if we were in a working session together, we could pull up a little couple of paragraphs like this out of an actual proposal and say, how did we do? How's our customer focus when we look at 2 paragraphs like this? Well, my first glimpse is there's not one single mention of the customer. Every sentence, it seems like, starts with us, our, we. It's all about us. So just without even reading through this and digging into it, my first thought is, wow, this is really all about the writer, and they don't even mention the customer, and I doubt they even address any of their hot buttons or issues if we were to really dig into it. So just in summary, understand what good, better, and best proposal writing techniques are. Remember, always keep the customer and the evaluator in mind. Improve readability. Apply some of these best practices. Best practice assumes we practice. We've got to keep practicing. Review, review, review everything we can. Mallory, we've gone a little over. Is there a burning question you wanted to submit to the panel? I know there were a lot that came in we didn't get to. I apologize for that.
You know, we do have so many questions, so I might just recommend that if you have more questions, then please ask us, and we can get to some of those, and we will have another writing webinar, so watch out for another one of those.
And there's a couple of our email addresses as well. Nancy, thank you so much. Paige, thank you. Mallory, thanks for putting this all together and navigating for us. And everybody, please be safe and healthy, and hope you'll join us on some future sessions. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.